Morning, everyone. Yes, the name's Matt Eglington, of course. Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, Rick. Head of Local Highways Policy at the Department for Transport. Can I just check, please, that you can see my screen and you can see me as well? Could I just get a confirmation? That's all right.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, I hope everyone is well today, and those in the south of England as well are looking after themselves, especially with Storm Kieran whipping in. It's been very interesting for me at the moment. Got one eye on that at all times, and see keeping tabs with our Transport Security Operations Centre about how this is kind of panning out. But yes, thank you again, Rick. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm going to do a quick canter through on some of the things which have been happening over the last few weeks, and just a bit of a focus on what the department, especially from my team, looking at, especially with regards to kind of resilience and ultimately what this leads to in terms of sustainability on the local highway network. So I was actually at a Tarmac's excellent event on Tuesday. I think Brian may be here. I know he's joining a bit later this morning, but just to kind of recap on some of the things which we were talking about on Tuesday. So the paragraph on the left hand side about it was a really kind of good summary, actually a really good summary around actually what we can expect around kind of maintaining our roads, and with Rick mentioning around kind of the challenges in local authority budgets. Knowing that at least 1 in 10 councils are not in best possible financial shape at the moment, and again that pressure to deliver more for less, and budgets are always top of local authorities' minds when it comes to funding for local highways activities. So I thought I'd just draw attention to kind of some of the thinking that we set out about actually where sustainability in highways kind of sits, and the core parts, and where mentioning about the resilience and local authorities being able to go invest in the structures around responding to events such as Storm Kieran, but also the 3 other kind of areas which we believe actually lead to true sustainability. And as Rick rightly pointed out, around kind of the decarbonisation aspects in terms of both the vehicle and the infrastructure, in terms of low carbon alternatives, in terms of maintaining our networks, biodiversity, and of course adaptation, the increased investment in building back better our infrastructure to withstand the changing climate. And we have noticed a big uptick in warmer, wetter winters, hotter summers, which are wreak devastation on both sides of the coin in terms of less less resilient infrastructure due to these kind of changing weather patterns. But anyway, just to kind of do a brief recap on a few things that I'm keeping busy with at the moment. So just a few things which might be of interest at the moment. So what's the local highways team kind of looking at the moment? So I guess right in the middle, we always keep on making the point to Treasury around getting that sustainable long-term funding assessment for local highways maintenance investments. We've produced a lot of documents, worked with a lot of different stakeholders, and the alarm survey is always a very useful report to add to that arsenal of evidence to demonstrate to Treasury. The other bits around the traffic signals upgrades, which I'll talk a bit later on. So we are working very closely across a whole different range of teams in the department, from traffic and technology, road safety, and also the streetworks team, and having a much more kind of unified approach in terms of how we are working around the local highway policy framework to obviously help local authorities. Part of that, picking up on the road condition, I'm sure many of you are aware about the standards for monitoring of road condition. Not necessarily moving away from a scanner, but opening up the market to ensure that companies who can reach accreditation for demonstrating they can achieve a standard of how road condition is ascertained, meaning that local authorities can actually choose the service that works best for them, and hopefully drive innovation in how we take data quicker, more efficiently, and more accurately off our network, so local authorities are equipped to tackle defects as when they appear, and also prevent them in the first place. The resilient highway networks implementation. I mean, it had been 2 years since we published our resilience independent report published by Hugh Deeming. This is a very useful report, and I think it feels very timely to talk about now, especially with Storm Ciarán, because it does detail previous inclement weather events, and we are considering actually how best to ensure this is considered by local authorities going forward, as we do expect these severe weather events to be kind of more frequent. And then on the decarbonisation side, which I know we've got some Live Lab colleagues here, which would be great to hear from them, the 30 million investment into Live Lab 2 decarbonising local roads, run by the Associate Directors for Economy, Environment, Planning and Transport. Some very, very exciting projects that have taken place both in the previous one and in this new session, and we'll hear more from them a bit later on this morning. Just a brief recap really on some of the announcements that have come out. There's been thick and fast over the last few weeks. So starting off with the plan for drivers, and I've taken out a choice selection of some of the ones which, again, bits what I've mentioned beforehand, but the plan for drivers has really kind of amalgamated a lot of both new and existing policy positions to kind of highlight what the government is doing and what the government is looking to focus on. So a real big comprehensive piece of work with the Streetworks team and joining together around the moving towards lane rental schemes. Minister Holden has been very keen for local authorities to implement them. I think there are a few local authorities in London and Kent that have used them so far, but the roads minister is very keen that these are kind of worked out, and a portion of that funding raised is then reinvested back in the road network, which is not a bad thing at all. Highlighting and really embedding some of the work that we've been leading already, like highlighting obviously the Live Lab 2 program and the better road data condition, which is fantastic that our ministers are very keen and supportive of the work that we've been doing to help local authorities. And then to quickly go back on the traffic light signalling, I mean, just stepping away slightly, I guess, from the asphalt and our surface materials. It's not just the condition of the road, it's also the quality of our traffic signals and structures. And this 70 million is an unprecedented investment in traffic signalling. So a lot of this is maintenance, and we work very closely on the policy around actually how these things are, especially with the obsolescence. So the first one, the 30 million funds about the upgrading of traffic signal systems to get rid of halogens and obsolete equipment to improve reliability for those smoother, safer journeys. And then the green light fund and the oh gosh, what's the other fund called? I didn't put it on. Didn't put it on there. Well, it's about traffic management essentially, to optimize traffic flow and balance traffic across city centres. So a whole range of different and exciting policy bits around there, which I think will certainly benefit local authorities in the months and years to come. As Rick mentioned earlier about funding and the pressures with local authorities, yes, Network North published on the 4th of October had a bit of a well, certainly a big shift in departmental priorities, with a large section of HS2 with funding being repurposed for a number of different aspects. And one of the big winners was for us, for highways maintenance, which was fantastic. It demonstrates actually the hard work from stakeholders and making the case to Treasury that this is an important aspect to have that funding for a large infrastructure project being reinvested at a local level. So at the moment, as the report dictates, 8.3 billion over the next decade, split and weighted because of the increased investment in the north. So obviously taking that into account. So just a quick recap: 3.3 billion in the north, 2.2 billion in the Midlands, and 2.8 billion nationally outside the north and the Midlands. So allocations for this will be published very, very shortly. We are currently working with obviously Treasury and Number 10 to get these out as soon as possible to make sure that people know what this entails. Of course, the 8.3 will be nothing, and so we also what we obviously would want to make sure that we have baseline to ensure that this money will be additional funding to the local highway network. And the bit on MRN and major roads also uplifts the MRN LLM schemes or in the programme. So 1.46 billion allocated for the north, nearly $1 billion for Midlands, and over $1.5 billion for the rest of England outside London. And guidance will be issued very shortly on that next steps back and the process in the spring of 2024. And then just a bit on some of the extra funding. So it's not just the highways maintenance, but also the investment into our local transport networks. So one of the really interesting bits, especially with the city region sustainable transport settlements, which includes equivalent amounts of highways maintenance funding for those local authorities within the MCAs, providing an additional 3.9 billion for northern regions, over a billion for West Midlands, and 100 million for the west of England, which include 1.5 billion for the East Midlands combined county authority as well, which seeing this devolution at play, meaning obviously the creation of our mayors having that kind of greater control, and of course that money is then can be flexed so they can decide to put more into our local highway networks, which is always a good thing. And then CRSTS2 will run from 2027-28 to 21-32, and so those allocations have been published, and then the final allocations will be published in due course. And then one of the most exciting bits are these local integrated transport settlements for places outside of the city regions to really drive that local transport investment in the north and the Midlands, those areas that would have benefited from the HS2 expansion. So that this is a repurposing to ensure that those improvements and developments are seen at the local level to help local communities. And again, I'm sorry I can't announce any allocations today, but those will be in due course later this year, and guidance to help those areas that are receiving the local integrated transport assessments to make the most of the funding available and set out the funds accountability framework. And just very lastly for me, picking up, I guess, on that kind of best practice and incentivization. And so for many years, the department ran the incentive element. So at the moment, this is still in development, but I think there's a bit of a sneak peek behind some of the thinking that we are doing. So the incentive element, it helped and was successful in demonstrating about local authorities moving to a whole life cycle risk-based approach to asset management. But of course, we want to see consider options about how to develop this, how to keep local authorities moving onwards and upwards. Again, take into account obviously the rising tide and the focus on decarbonisation and resilience. So trying to knit these things together, take into account kind of capability and capacity, and also the communication and collaboration in terms of how local authorities work together, and also communicating to stakeholders and to the general public about work to take place on the road to ensure that messages around how we're making the network smoother, safer for communities is best put, and especially around, I don't know, for example, like inclement weather events, that people are kept well informed to ensure that people remain safe whilst using the network. Thanks so much. Appreciate that was quite a quick canter through, so very happy to take questions now if there are any.
I don't know whether you can hear and see me, Matt.
Certainly can, loud and clear, Rick.
Good. Nice to see you this morning, Matt. There aren't any questions in the chat yet, but I've got a couple to get the ball rolling. You mentioned, I think it's possibly on your very first slide, about biodiversity. I mean, could you expand a little bit what that looks like? I mean, for example, are we expecting new road schemes to have a net biodiversity gain? How does it work?
So, I mean, there are plenty of things around there. So, I mean, the local highway network is about 186,000 miles in England, and there is, and for a lot of these places, especially in the more rural areas, they are directly linked to the natural environment. And you're thinking about bits like kind of like drainage and how surface water and flows and whatnot, and wildflower verges, tree planting as well. So clearly there is transport infrastructure has a big cost, and part of this is looking at local authorities also have responsibilities around the biodiversity in local areas as well. A lot of this stuff comes through DEFRA, obviously the environment department. So a lot of this is really that push around considering principles and policies which mean that the highway environment and the natural environment can coexist in the best way possible, because there's a lot of cause and effect on both. If you do not have good good biodiversity, obviously the roads networks and the wildflower verges. There are some excellent trials, for example, in Devon around utilize a lot of the rural road networks to have these fantastic wildflower verges, which obviously encourage species of solitary bees and whatnot. And so actually there's a real big opportunity to make our networks green as possible, not just in terms of the materials they use, but actually how they interact with the natural environment as well.
Okay, that's fine. And then a second question for me, which you might think this is slightly tongue-in-cheek, but we know that the public and the media focuses on potholes rather than road conditions. What can we do to stop ministers also falling into this trap? Every time there's an announcement made, the funding, they equate it to a number of potholes it will fill, and it doesn't really mesh with the concept of whole life asset management, which we're all trying to promote and adhere to. So, can you have a word, Matt?
So one thing that I think has been very it's sometimes it can be a bit like turning a tanker on these, but I mean I have spent a not inconsiderable amount of time on these things, Rick. And one thing which has been very good is that if you look at Network North, it now refers to roads resurfacing, and in budget documents we've got bridges in there, and we've got resurfacing roads up and down the country rather than just on the focus on potholes. And yes, potholes are incredibly emotive. As a cyclist, I nearly came off my bike. Only time I've ever had a serious accident has been on a road defect. So I know from being very, very shaken up, spending about half an hour just to try and get my heart rate back down to a normal resting pace. Literally saw my life flash before my eyes. But
I mean, we've been having conversations with the motorcycle lobby, and of course, anyone on two wheels is more vulnerable to potholes. For motorists, it's damage more often than injury, but certainly for cyclists and motorcyclists, the outcomes can be a lot worse.
Very quickly to pick up on that point, Rick. So we've had a bit of a structural reorganisation in the department. So I work. So highways are in the same team as cycleways and also Active Travel England as well. So the sponsor body. So there is a big focus, especially with the risk profile of how road defects are treated, because a lot of times the usual way is to treat where the two palm of the tires of a car tire treated. However, there's a lot of defects that also take place across kind of the metalwork and the side of the roads, where generally active travel users will be using instead.
Okay, I get that. I'm still not seeing any questions. I don't know whether the moderator can see some that I can't.
I believe Abby Aldridge has her hand up.
Can you make that line, Andrew? I think.
Hang on. Yeah, I've just done it. I think. Oh, have I just?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else's is displaying differently, but on mine it's saying chat and Q&A are disabled, so that's probably why you're not seeing any messages. And during Matthew's presentation, I didn't have the slides coming up. I don't know whether that's my Teams playing up or not.
I mean, certainly I could see the slides, Mark.
Okay.
Okay, gosh, sorry, Abby. It wasn't helpful if no one else could say anything. But then there's no. Yes, I just realised there's no chat at the moment. Are there? There are quite a few hands up now.
The Q&A is
I
there.
did have...
If you press Q&A, if you presenters press Q&A twice, you will see the questions.
Ah, fine. Wonderful. Sorry, I had the chat open and said apologies, and there was no notifications on there. Wonderful.
I did have a query from one of my colleagues just to confirm, with the self-assessment ending, he just wanted to check that the incentive fund element for next year wasn't affected, because that's already agreed, isn't it? So that's okay, isn't it?
So with the part of the issue around the self-assessment is, if you cast your mind back to 2014, the incentive was part of the consultation document, which included funding for a long-term bit as well. So now we need to take, because in terms of what the self-assessment has done is that everyone is now reporting that they have a the asset management process in place. So we are currently at the moment looking at what next steps that means for incentivise local authorities to keep on adopting kind of best practice. So I'm hopeful that we can share something shortly, but it has been a watch this space moment. But now we have extra funding, which is now set out for the next decade. That gives us lots of kind of room to kind of to move in that bit with that certainty of the long-term funding. But ultimately, a lot of these things are the decision of ministers, and so I am hopeful that we can continue working with ministers to ensure that we can get something announced and so local authorities know what next steps are.
I'm conscious of the time. The programme that we're trying to stick to. Matt has said that if there are any questions that we've not had chance to ask during this session, then we can send him some questions and he'll respond, and we can then distribute that at a later date. But when we do these kind of things, it is important that we stick to time. So Matt, thank you so much. It's really good to have you here. Really interesting insight into some of the work that the department is doing. And I think I now have